So taking a closer look at this area here, so we're zoomed out so you can get a perspective of what we're looking at here. Something really fascinating happens. At least, if you're an A&P student, this should be fascinating, right? So we've been talking about the respiratory system, upper respiratory, and now, looking at the trachea and some of the things that happen there. Like I said, some really pretty interesting things happen in regards to spasming and closing the windpipe and such. One of the really cool things or fascinating things, like I was saying, is something called the aortic vagal reflex. So as you can imagine, it has to do with your aorta. So it's an aortic vagal, so vagus reflex. So what will end up happening? And actually, the most famous case of this particular phenomenon happened in the early 2000s. I believe it was 2002 with President Bush. And it's occurring to me right now that if you're in high school listening to this right now, or in college, if you're you most likely weren't even born, or you were just barely born when this happened. And actually, I can actually remember when I heard about this in the news. So, but in any case, what ended up happening was that George Bush, during a football game, was eating a lot of pretzels, and he put a ton in his mouth. And what happened is that he had a large bolus get stuck in his esophagus. And this particular thing, the aortic vagal reflex, this typically happens with bread. At least that's the most common, food that's being eaten when this particular thing happens. So Bush ate a lot of pretzels, and he was choking. Now, again, this happened in his esophagus, right? So what happens is that bolus gets stuck, it gets lodged into the esophagus, and it causes a lot of inflammation, applying pressure to the trachea, which will then close off some of the ventilation. And then that applies pressure to the aorta. This is the aortic arch, right? Just superior to the heart. And when the pressure is applied to the aorta, it then applies pressure to the vagus nerve, the cranial nerve number 10. So if you remember your anatomy with the nervous system, cranial nerve number 10, it has a lot of duties. It controls things with the digestive system, with cardiovascular. So one of the interesting things that will happen is that the nerve, the nerve will actually cause your heart to skip a beat, right? So on top of it causing you to skip a beat and your windpipe being partially closed, one of the typical results is the person fainting, and that's what happened with George Bush. And so, you get the sensation that you're choking, but in actuality, it's the esophagus that's applying pressure to the trachea. And so, I'm going to bring my wife into this particular topic too, because, she had been suffering with asthma for years. And in recent years, or in the last year or so, we've been doing our own research with this. And what we found out with some of the latest research is that they've attributed asthma conditions to actually people having digestive issues. So with my wife in particular, she got tested, and what they found out was that she was actually having a lot of acid reflux. And that acid reflux was that inflammation that was occurring in the esophagus was taking an effect on the trachea. And so in between the tracheal, the C rings, the cartilaginous rings that I have highlighted, you have muscle, tracheal muscle. And that tracheal muscle will become inflamed, and as it inflamed, it occludes, it blocks part of the windpipe, causing the labored breathing, the wheezing that asthmatics commonly complain about. And so it's really fascinating for us to learn that there's a really intimate relationship. This is really the story for the body in general. When that you have one condition, usually you can attribute it to something going haywire at a different location in the body. It's important to recognize that the body is just like this massive kinetic chain, that when you have something wrong at one particular location, that's usually indicative of, one or two or three other things going wrong in another place, and, the body just kind of compensating for a weakness or or an injury at another location. So in any case, guys, I hope you found this interesting, and I want to thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.